Jenson, coming to you live from Noblesville City Hall on another edition of our Mental Health Monday program, where my good friend Kristen Boice, the owner of Pathways of Healing, joins me. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. It's good to see you today.
Awesome. Always awesome to see you. We started this, it's hard to believe, 2.5 years ago now, Kristen. A little experiment during COVID of whether we should talk about our feelings on social media. And you had a somewhat timid politician that I guess was willing to do it. And here we are 2.5 years later with your kindness and your willingness to join us and continue this conversation. So it has been incredibly rewarding.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's been one of the best things I've ever been a part of. So
Yeah.
I feel deeply grateful for this
This
time
is
together.
Awesome. Yes, this is our chance to kind of pick some topics, discuss with the public, and get some feedback from you. For those that are watching all around the world, today we're going to tackle some very topical seasonal depression topic, which I know we were just discussing the Jenson household last night, that the sun is going down earlier and it is rising later, which causes some different emotions in people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some shame that you might feel and feelings of maybe not good enough, and how those are all intertwined, because as we learned, our feelings are always intertwined like that. So we're excited to tackle that. A few ground rules. If you have any questions today, feel free to chime in the chat. If we don't know the answer right away, we'll get answers for you. If you want to just say hi and let us know that you're watching, that's awesome as well. This is really time for you to carve out around a half an hour with us to kind of dive into some of these topics and get yourself centered to start a great week. But before we do that, we always start with a great breathing exercise, some square breathing, and I'll let Kristen Boice walk us through that.
This is an important strategy to use as you're probably dealing with some transition into the fall. And you can feel the difference in your nervous system when there's less sunlight and the temperatures drop. So whenever you feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little activated, I feel overwhelmed, I feel stressed, I feel like I'm in shame, this is your first step. So we call it square breathing. You're going to put your feet on the floor. Why do we put our feet on the floor? To kind of center your nervous system, kind of ground your nervous system. So we press our feet into the floor. Then we're going to inhale through our nose, and then we're going to slowly exhale out our mouths. And typically the count is inhale for 4, hold the breath for 4, and then slowly exhale out your mouth like you're cooling soup or a cookie. And this is to help the nervous system come back to calm. When we are not feeling calm, this is how we get back center. So let's practice with 2 breaths together. So feet on the floor, pressing into your feet, deep inhale through your nose, belly to the spine, and release. Do one more together. Pressing your feet into the floor, big deep inhale, and release. Just kind of notice your shoulders dropping. We carry a lot of tension and tightness in our shoulders, neck, and our jawline and our face. So throughout your day, check in with your jaw. If you're clenching your teeth, just kind of loosen your jaw. Notice your eyes, if they're intense. If you're squinting, kind of soften your gaze. And try breathing 4 to 5 breaths every hour and check into your nervous system and see if that made a difference.
Love it. I do it all the time in the car. I think I talk about that. That's kind of my time to breathe, but do it throughout the day. I always feel it all over, especially the upper half of my body. I can feel a sense of relief when I do that. So it's a great gut check for yourself throughout the day. So remember to breathe. All right. So we're going to tackle some seasonal depression conversation. So admittedly, Kristen, I have struggled with this topic. I haven't struggled with the topic. I have struggled with seasonal depression in the past. I have personally tried to remedy that through physical fitness, being very diligent about that in the winter months, especially, as much as it pains you to get out of bed and go move. But we also realize that anxiety lives in the body and we have to move to let it process its way through it. I know people use different lamps and different light structures to kind of work through it, but it is a very real thing. And it's not just the winter months. We're seeing it as we transition to fall right now. We're back into kind of our routine in school, and you kind of might have this blah feeling that comes with it. So I'm excited to tackle it. Again, I want to admit that I have struggled with this in the past and have had to come up with some creative ways. I did also go to the tanning bed, I think one time, like 10 years ago, to try to, I'm not going to advocate for that on Mental Health Monday. But I did do that, I think, as a strategy at one point in time. So, but you tell us what really is healthy strategies.
So let's go over what is seasonal affective disorder. The acronym is SAD. So think how applicable that is to when we think of seasonal affective disorder. We feel sad. Typically, the onset is late fall, early winter, and we know 5% of the United States struggles with what the full diagnosis of SAD. And typically, you're going to see a loss in appetite, you're either sleeping too much because we're making almost too much melatonin, which causes us to be sleepy because we're lacking vitamin D. And vitamin D obviously comes from the sunlight. And when we don't have the sun exposure and there's more dreariness, we're not getting that hit of serotonin that we need so desperately. So we're lacking serotonin, which helps with mood regulation. So when we have SAD, we have maybe a decrease in appetite. We really isolate a lot more. We don't have a lot of motivation. We lack motivation because we have a neurobiological chemical response to lack of sunlight. And it's very important to note that typically women struggle more than men, research says. We don't know why, though. The research doesn't tell us why that is true. And typical onset is between 18 years old and 30 years old. And then the numbers increase when we look at the winter blues. So many people, you might not fit the criteria for SAD, seasonal affective disorder, because it's not affecting your functioning to the point where you're consistently not able to go to work. Maybe you're having struggle in your mood regulation. Maybe you're using alcohol and drugs to self-medicate. If that's the case, we're going to go through treatment modalities for SAD. Maybe you fall more into the winter blues category where you just kind of feel blah. That's why we call it the winter blues. You have more of the blahs, as we call it. And that number increases to 18 to 20% of the US population. So you're going to see a lot of people struggle with the winter blues and that transition from summer to fall to winter. And it's important. There's a couple things to note in terms of how do we kind of do a self-assessment on do I have the winter blues or am I struggling with seasonal affective disorder? If you have chronic lack of, you're missing work, you have a chronic lack of, you're having more suicidal thoughts, you're lacking a sense of any kind of your hopelessness, you feel a lot of despair, you really feel a total shift how you're feeling about yourself and perhaps how you're feeling about life that's different than you were feeling before. And it's more of a chronic everyday. Therefore, we may have some chemical imbalance that we need to address potentially with light therapy, where you can buy a box. I know they sell them everywhere now. They're basically light therapy. You sit in front of it in the morning. Research says the morning is the optimal time. 15 to 20 minutes in front of the light every single day helps with your neurotransmitters and feeling your mood increase to not feel so much despair. You're feeling not as much of the winter blues. We know medication can be helpful, so we recommend consulting with your physician or psychiatrist if this is the case. And you mentioned exercise. We do know through research 30 minutes of exercise or some form of movement, even though we don't feel like it. This is the tough part, because if you're really struggling with seasonal affective disorder, you might not have the motivation to do it. Therefore, medication can help get you to the point where you do feel like, okay, I can at least kind of rally and do a little bit of exercise. We know nutrition is important, so people tend to up their caffeine when there is less sunlight. And so we have to monitor our caffeine intake and make sure that doesn't impact how you're feeling and functioning, because we know caffeine can affect mood. Also, alcohol intake. Alcohol is a depressant. And oftentimes we're thinking, oh, I just don't know. I feel like crap. I don't have any motivation. And so we're drinking. And therefore, that's depressing us even more. So we have to watch alcohol intake. Here's what I recommend to clients. I'll say, how do you feel when you make a schedule to maybe meet up with a friend? they're like, I feel a lot better when I'm like meeting with people, even if it's once a week, like schedule a lunch, schedule time with friends, be intentional about putting that on your calendar ahead of time. Because a lot of times, like, oh, good, they canceled and now I'm off the hook. And really, that doesn't help us, especially in the fall and winter months, because we're going to tend to isolate more and then feel more lonely, feel more sad, feel more depressed, and feel like people don't care about us. So it's important that we set time to schedule time with friends and have a support system. There's nothing worse to feel like you're the only one dealing with it, where you're absolutely not. We know 18 to 20% of the population is also feeling, and I think that's a low number, actually. You have to kind of look at research with a different lens, because I feel like there's a lot more of that going on than not. And we also know COVID has affected depression and anxiety. We're having lots of research come out on long-term COVID, and that is also impacting people as seasonal changes begin. They were already struggling with that, and then it gets even more exacerbated as the seasons are changing.
So let's talk about this for a second, about the kind of making yourself work out when you don't want to, or meet a friend when you don't want to. Because I don't know about you. This is from personal experience, but there's been a few times, even last week, I didn't oversleep. I just reset the alarm and didn't wake up at 4:15 to go to Orange Theory. And it sounds great to like roll over, like you've listened to your body, yada yada yada. But then the rest of the day, that just ate at me and actually made it way worse. And if I think back to times probably a decade ago, when I really struggled through like winter months, you want to lay in bed because you're just tired. But then by the time mid morning comes, you're mad at yourself for laying in bed, and it actually is just kind of almost a spiral, right? And so how do you, any, I guess, tricks or tips to kind of like get you over that hump, get you out of bed, or get you to that meal with that friend or that coffee date? How do we kind of mess with ourselves to get us there?
I think the first thing is know yourself. Okay. Cause I know I'll be like, yeah, I don't feel like it. And so really the commitment to yourself, it's really are you okay?
Yeah,
There's
sorry, wrong
no
pipe.
problem.
Wrong
Yeah.
pipe.
It's really a commitment to yourself, because when we do it for other people, we're then going to go down the shame spiral of like, I'm terrible. I'm bad. I should have done this. We should all over ourselves. So it's really kind of one, we have to offer ourselves some self compassion and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to make a different commitment. I'm going to and giving yourself like knowing what your patterns are. Like, are you a person that just kind of, and a lot of us are, I'm in this category where I'm too tired, and then I might have to readjust when I exercise. I might have to readjust the conversations I might have to really acknowledge the conversation in my head that is kind of sabotaging me at times, because there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I just don't feel like it. I just don't want to do it. And then I'll say, okay, what's really going on? Okay, am I going to sleep early enough? And lots of times I'm not. Lots of times I'm staying up late because it's free time, and it feels so good to do my own thing at night. And I'm kind of not setting myself up for the energy I need to kind of, and the mindset I need to really make that decision. So it's not a black and white answer. It's more of a gray answer, because motivation is deep and wide. I mean, we all want to feel motivated. That's like one of the things I love. I used to listen to Zig Ziglar. Do you remember Zig Ziglar?
Yeah,
He was a
yeah.
motivational speaker. And I'm not kidding you. I would put that tape on in the morning and I would listen to it every day, because I was like, I am going to get up. I'm going to get up with enthusiasm. And now we kind of talk, that can be construed as toxic positivity. Like, just bypass your emotions and just go with it. So at the time, I needed a little kick. So sometimes that's a podcast. Maybe that's music. Maybe that's, getting up to walk your dog because the dog needs to go out and be walked. It's knowing yourself. And then what are those things that help give you the boost to encourage you to do the thing you want to do rather than self-sabotage?
And maybe it's, meeting up with a friend to work out, or having some accountability built in there, because like I said, I have never regretted going to work out in the morning. Now, I don't like getting up at 4:15, but I've never regretted when it's over. And I always feel infinitely better going forward. But it's just, again, such a mind game of how do we know ourselves? How do we get ourselves past that point during those dark depressing times, whether it be seasonal depression or other reasons, to get ourselves to do that going forward. So
you get up at 4:15.
yeah, it's pretty awful, but like I said, I feel great. By about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm really I struggle, but I feel much better when I do it, and definitely helps my mental state. So what else before we kind of close the chapter on this on SAD? Maybe some identification. What moods might change in the wintertime? What should we be looking out for in ourselves or for others to kind of trigger this?
More irritability.
Yeah.
So you might see some more irritation. You might feel more anger. And we always associate sad with sadness. Of course, that is definitely something to watch. And the key here is, are you losing motivation to take care of yourself, brush your teeth, shower, like do some of your daily routine self-care things, eat properly. A lot of times if someone's really had a bout of sad, they lose motivation for all of those things. What they normally do on a daily basis starts to drop off. And it's really important that when that happens, you consult a physician and a therapist, because a therapist can help see, is there anything else going on? Here's the other thing I want to say. I ended up doing a podcast like 3 weeks in a row on grief, and I didn't plan it that way, but we know that this is a season for grief. We can't not have this conversation without talking about grief and loss during this time. This is the highest numbers we'll see in therapy, people coming into therapy, is this transition to fall and winter, because there's a lot that comes up during this time period that we might not be consciously aware of. So a lot of times we have to explore on a timeline, like what else might have happened that we aren't recognizing. Our bodies remember everything. So your nervous system could have a memory that you have no idea. Like you're like, nothing happened. And then we'll explore. They're like, I didn't even really remember that, but my body was telling me something is here that needs to be tended to and released and processed that didn't get processed in real time. So listening to your nervous system is really important, because as we know, the body is here to tell us information. If we don't listen to it, it's going to keep screaming at us.
Fascinating. I like that. The body remembers everything. The body remembers everything. So remember that going forward. So, okay, well, great. Well, let's close the chapter right now. We'll come back to SAD a little bit in probably in another month or so, because we're going to be really getting into the winter season, the holidays, and that brings up a whole nother set of grief and stuff. So we're gonna revisit this many more times over the next several months. So, but I wanted to spend a little time today at your suggestion, kind of talking about shame and not feeling good enough. These are, every week Kristen and I, or every other week Kristen and I kind of touch base on the topics du jour. We might have things on the city side that we're kind of dealing with. But then also, Kristen, you have a front row seat every day to the front lines of what you're hearing on the therapy side. And obviously not feeling good enough and shame is something that's probably walking through your door a lot these days. And I know you want to touch on it.
Yeah. So shame lives in the nervous system again. So this is important to recognize. Shame
So much living in the nervous system.
So much. And our bodies will tell us, like maybe we'll get a flushed face. Maybe we'll start sweating more. Maybe our breath starts changing. That's my indicator that shame just got triggered. And now we call it, like Dr. Brene Brown says, I'm in a shame spiral, which means I don't feel good enough. I feel defective. I feel like a bad person. Something in me gets activated of not feeling enough. And here's the birthplace of shame that is so important for us to recognize. We have so many voices in our head that are not ours, but they sound like our voice. They sound like us. And we unconsciously replay those in subtle ways in our nervous system every single day. So if someone looks at us with a look, this happens with my kids all the time. They're like, why do you look disgusted? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not disgusted. I'm exhausted. But my face is there. It's landing for them as disgust. I'm going, well, am I disgusted? So I have to take that information and look at it. But then I can have a response around their response to me looking disgusted. I can either get defensive and be like, I'm not disgusted. I'm just tired. Or I can take a deep breath and I can explore that feedback and say, oh, maybe my face does look disgusted because I'm really tired. and I'm exhausted, and maybe I do have that expression. Maybe I am disgusted. Let me take a look at that. So the exploration of shame is so important because it gets passed down generationally. Let me say it again. Shame gets passed down generationally. What does that mean? That means we all have shame, and no one gets out of it. No one gets out of this category. And it means if I don't feel good enough as a mother, I don't feel good enough as a parent, and I want to feel like I'm a good parent, I'm going to be like hustling. I'm going to be like, I'm going to get the best parent award. I'm going to really try to do it differently than my parents. But inadvertently, I'm coming from a place of shame. I'm coming from a place of shame, which is then I'm putting that on my kids because I want them to make me feel like I'm a good parent. I'm, loving and I'm kind and they're connected to me and they're telling me everything. It's such a burden on them and they feel it and they feel it. And then my perfectionism can get transferred to them. And now they feel like they have to be this perfect kid in order for them to be lovable. So shame can be very contagious if not made aware of. And I have to look at my shame triggers. I mean, someone could say something to me that sounds like criticism. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, they think I'm terrible. They think I'm an idiot. They think I'm stupid. They think I don't know what I'm doing. And now I'm functioning from that story of what I think they're thinking about me rather than my worth and value coming from within and me functioning from my secure, authentic self and saying, okay, it's okay. They can have their feelings. It's okay. They can have their opinions. It doesn't make me unworthy, unlovable, less than, or defective. This is a lifetime of work, by the way, making it sound like, oh, just recognize your shame. And no, shame comes and goes all the time. I have it every day. I'd be lying to you if I was like, oh, yes, and I feel wonderful all the time. It'd be a sham. You wouldn't trust me. You'd be like, I don't really trust her.
Well, I
Because,
was not because I think I spend, like to your point, on a daily situation where I have myself convinced of what someone else feels about me prior to even having a conversation with said person. You know what I mean? It's that going where we go down a rabbit hole and then we have ourselves painted into an entire picture before. And people do that to me all the time too. They assume I feel a certain way, and I'm like, well, we haven't talked yet. You know what I mean? Like we haven't gotten to the point of me even having a feeling about you because I don't even know you that well. It's amazing what we can do.
oh, it's we get into the story and we
Mhm.
believe it's true. The brain loves certainty. So the brain will create these stories. And here's the deal. They'll come into therapy and they'll tell me about what they think their partner thinks. And they will tell me everything. Like, this is what I think they think. I'm like, well, have you asked them? Well, no, but I know they do. I'm like, okay, but we don't really know. It's not a fact. Like, we're saying because you think and you're convinced your hypothesis is correct. And that's how you're functioning in the relationship. You're functioning from the hypothesis that that person thinks you're an idiot. Now, if they said you're an idiot, that's one thing.
Mhm.
But typically when I ask, I'll say, well, did they call you an idiot? Sometimes this is true in childhood and things like that. But most of the time they're like, well, no, but they make me feel like one. Okay, well, what are they saying? Have you asked them, do you think I'm stupid? And even if they said yes, we have to work on that could be a projection based on them not feeling good enough, them feeling stupid. Most of the time, it's our issue. Like, I feel like an idiot. So then I think everybody thinks I'm an idiot. You
Mhm.
see? If
Mhm.
I don't think I'm an idiot, let's say I hate my earlobes. Okay. I'm looking at everybody else's ears. I'm like, they're looking at my earlobe. They are looking at how big my earlobe is. Here's the truth. It's because I have an issue with my earlobe. Now I'm projecting that they think I have big earlobes. I'm making this silly example up. But if I have an issue, then I'm going to create more shame stories based on what I believe about myself. It might be I'm unlovable. And so I'm too much. I'm too this, I'm too that. People are just going to think I am way too much for them. And maybe for some that's true. Okay, those aren't people that are going to be healthy people to have in your life. So shame is really a powerful emotion, and underneath it is fear, sadness, typically. So we want to explore what's underneath the shame. Then we want to float back. Where did I get these shame stories from? Where did this come from? typically it's very young from multiple sources that have proven our theory correct that I am an idiot. So let's say you had a coach, a teacher, a parent kind of feel like you're not good enough, like you didn't get good enough grades, you didn't perform well enough. You're going to go, see, that's probably true. Where it's absolutely not, it was their issue projected onto you.
Yeah, I think sometimes we, again, and I mean this as kindly as can be, and I've had to tell myself this many times, I think we give ourselves too much credit when we think that other people are thinking about us that much. You know what I mean?
We're thinking
Like,
about ourselves. This is the truth. Research
yeah,
shows this. We're thinking about how
yeah,
we feel and what
yeah.
people think of us majority of the time.
Yeah, and that's, again, I think we think the outside world's thinking the same thing, and they're worried about themselves. To your point, they're worried about their own piece of it. I want to back up real quick before we run out of time. I hear a lot, and it's because of the age group I'm in. I have a lot of friends with young parents. There's mom guilt, there's dad guilt, there's but you touched on it a minute ago, kind of that shame as a parent. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I see a lot of it right now. Like I said, with my group of friends and social circles where you're busy with life and you have all these kids running around and, oh my gosh, I'm not a great parent. I'm not, and there's a lot of that going on. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Well, and this is a topic I think we need to revisit next time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just saying, because exactly, you may just touch on it briefly, but I think there's a lot of parents going through that right now, and the Jensons are included in that category.
I think I'd be, if yes. If you're doing your own work, you're going to rumble with shame more because your expectations are so high because we don't want to screw up our kids.
Yep.
We're like, and here's the truth. There's no perfect parents. And I have to rumble through taking ownership for the things I've done and acknowledging the hurt that I've caused. There's nothing more powerful than looking at your own stuff. But the expectations we've created are so far unattainable that there is 0% chance you're going to get it right 100% of the time. 0% chance. And so we have to deal with, okay, how do I take a deep breath, acknowledge the parts I am doing well? Because we skip over those because we think it's like an all or nothing. Like, I am a terrible parent. I fed my kids junk all day. I let them watch TV, and now I'm a horrible parent because now I'm on the shame spiral of that. Versus, okay, I had an off day. I didn't feel great today. Let me give myself some compassion and let me check my expectations. Where have they come from? Where am I getting this? And a lot of times it's comparison. I'm telling you, we're looking at social media and everybody's got the perfect pictures. I mean, we're like, well, look, they've got the front porch with the pumpkins and the hay and all the things, and I've got nothing on my front porch. Yeah. And look, they've got matching outfits and matching jammies. And I mean, we go down this loophole of they're the perfect parent and I suck.
Yes.
Comparison takes us down the shame spiral every time.
Yeah.
Comparison takes us to shame every time.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I would like to maybe in a couple of weeks or next month go an entire session on this because, like I said, we see it all the time. Social media has a huge, major role to play in this, to your point. And so maybe we can address this a little bit more because I think there's so many parents that are, and I'm sure grandparents too, trying to keep up and expectations. Everyone has that. So, all right. Well, we'll circle back in a couple of weeks with y'all on that topic, and we'll go down our own spiral, a healthy spiral, discussing this topic. So, all right. Well, wonderful show today, Kristen Boice. You're the best. If someone needs help right now, where can they turn?
I love the 988.
Yes.
988. You can text or call if you're feeling any kind of suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, or you feel lonely and isolated and you need some assistance. Please dial 988 or text 988. It's 24/7, 7 days a week.
Or you are with someone who you fear that might be the case and you're trying to be an advocate for them. 988 is a great resource for you as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Please just memorize that, have it in your phone, know it's available anytime you need it.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, Kristen Boice, you're the best as always. Thank you for a wonderful show. And we'll be back in another 2 weeks with another edition of Mental Health Monday. But stay safe, everyone. And thanks again, Kristen.
Thank you.